Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. My name is Seth Crossman, joined here with Ben Brayshaw and Dan Mickelin. How are you today, guys?
I'm doing great, Seth. I'm doing really well. I'm excited about today's show.
You know, I think it's always very good when we find someone who can present the topic matter just really well and concisely. I am sure we're lined up for a great show today.
We're going to be covering the topic of everyone needs an estate plan. And so that means you, listener, you're going to want to stick around for this show. If you're new to Money on Tap, welcome. If you're on the podcast world and if you'd like to subscribe, thank you. We appreciate you for doing that. Please let us know. Send us a note at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Make sure to include in there somewhere that we can send you one of our gifts there that we have for you at Money on Tap. It's going to be something special for you with Money on Tap all over it, so you'll know where it came from. We've got a lot to cover today, so we're going to jump in with Money in the News.
And today's first article is coming to us from Business Insider. Tech stocks will rally through year-end and beyond. Fears a tidal wave of AI spending drives new bullish outlook, Wedbush says. This is coming to us, as I said, from Business Insider, Philip DeMott. And the article, the core premise here is that really, regardless of what the Fed does, and there's a lot of trepidation in the market every time there's an announcement coming relative to the Fed rate, that their stance over at Wedbush in particular is that, you know, this AI rally is going to continue right on through, regardless of that news, simply because of the fact that all these major companies, really the heavyweight end of the S&P 500, just pumping so much money into this space that it cannot help but continue to move the stock northward. And that has been the trend so far this year. Is really top end of the tech portion of the S&P 500 has just been having a fantastic year, and a lot of it is driven around this whole space of AI and speculation around what it's going to mean for the future of investing in our lives in general. But the consensus is, and particularly amongst the people here present in the article, is that there's no end in sight. They're looking at 12 to 18 months of continued rally here.
I mean, the AI space is just so broad, and there's just so much around this topic. It's actually perplexing about how much AI really drives almost everything. And the problem that is really hard for people to quantify is how this is impacting the market is the fact that AI is not a software in and of itself that runs independently of itself. It runs on top of other softwares. Other people use this as a means to create a greater, broader offering to their product. So people are buying AI to then distribute it through their software. So it's not like it's a singular sale. It's a sale to everybody in 5 million different other softwares being used. And so therefore, all these companies are trying to align themselves with this thing. It's just a massive, it's like a springboard under any company that decides to align with it, both financially and potential of how it finds its next customer, its next sale, its next opportunity to build the next product. It's just crazy because you don't even know how it's going to impact the whole marketplace. People are using AI in a way that has never been foreshadowed. We all saw Terminator 25, 30 years, whatever it is, I'll be back and all that stuff. But it really is here. It's here in a way that's kind of a little scary. I'm curious at where this is going to go, but honestly, we do know that you mentioned the word AI and you're, private equity or venture capitalist, someone's going to throw millions of dollars at you to see if you got something. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Ives here saying that stable, and Ives is the person from Wedbush that's given us some of this feedback, stable and improving tech spending. Now, stable and improving with, it looks like $1 trillion of tech spending in clear sights. What we have coming up next is maybe not so hot, but it's hardship withdrawals from retirement accounts increased in the second quarter. This is by Nora Colmer. And thank you very much for bringing us this information. The number of workers that tapped their 401k savings to cover financial emergencies increased in the second quarter of 2023, according to a recent report. So not a whole lot of people, I don't think a lot of people really know or understand that sometimes there's these little caveats or these little back doors to their 401ks that will allow them to take a loan. And it is a loan. You got to pay that money back, and there's an interest rate attached to that. And typically, people kind of reserve those or keep those there in case they don't have enough to cover the cost of car repair. That's one of the last ones I remember seeing was somebody needed some car repair. And that's a common factor because so many people right now are living paycheck to paycheck, and with inflation doing what it's been doing, to see numbers like we see them right now. And I want to come back to credit card debt as an all-time high. You name it, the factors are out there that are talking to us about, there's a squeeze going on right now. And this is one of the places where people are going to get some money.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the first places I look for data of whether or not people are struggling is the events we're talking about right here, is where people go to get money in emergency funds. And it's usually their retirement plan. And that's usually the last place they go. So that means they've already tapped out the 10 other resources and called mom and dad and try to figure out some other thing, or sold the extra car or dirt bike or whatever they have that is that. And then they hit their 401k. That's really a sign. And I think what's interesting about this article that I really kind of take to heart is that, after COVID, people lost jobs and all the problems people had and so forth. The average person was borrowing or taking hardship withdrawals about $8,770. That was the average, okay? But right now, we're around those same levels, and we're actually at $8,550. So we're not quite as bad as the post-COVID event, but we're nearing that kind of average. I think the article makes a good point to say, hey, this is getting concerning. And this is all indicative of the inflationary issues that we're dealing with, nationwide. I mean, everything is. We were just talking to somebody the other night, and they were telling us whatever they bought for their business, and I can't remember exactly what it was up 140% in 2 years. And it wasn't going down. And they're like, we have to pass this on to our customers, and they don't believe us. I mean, it's like we gave quotes and we lost money just keeping the honor of our quotes. So, I mean, things are not dropping the way the news media is saying. I don't know about you guys, but it's not like I've seen my grocery bill drop significantly, and we're, curbing inflation. Like, well, maybe we're staying it off a little bit, but I don't think it's going anywhere back to, even if it bounced below where it's at and down back to something above what it was before, that would be great. But all I see is the growth continuing at a slower pace from the ultimate highs. I don't know about you guys, but I don't see anything. Nothing is cheaper other than maybe a used car at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Prices seem stable but high, from wherever they peaked at. They're still roughly there. One element of good news coming out of the article is, though, that contributions to retirement accounts have remained pretty steady kind of through the process. On average, about 6.5% is being contributed into 401ks across the nation. So people have, continued to put money away, which is great, but they're having to tap into it a little bit here and there to kind of make ends meet and get on by. But it's important to know there are a couple of different situations where, should one of these hardships befall you, you can access your 401k and avoid the 10% premature penalty. And that would include things like medical care for yourself or your spouse, your dependents or a beneficiary, costs directly related to the purchase of a principal residence, but not the mortgage payment itself, tuition-related educational expenses, payments necessary to prevent eviction from your principal residence, funeral expenses for you, your spouse, your children, or dependents, and then some expenses to repair damage to your primary residence. So, if it's one of those handful of issues that are creating that crunch for you at home, do be aware that you can access these funds if you really need to, and avoid that 10% penalty, which can be, just an extra expense on top of the rest of it.
And, we talk to people about these too. We have clients who things are going well, and then, some sort of level of catastrophe happens, whether it's a health event, or, it could be a health event if you don't have any medical bills, but all of a sudden you're going to get foreclosed on your house. And foreclosure is one of those things that Dan mentioned. But realize that, when it comes to a 401k, if it's not a Roth, it's still going to be taxable as income. And if you don't have that awareness, like, if you're going to take out, $20, $30, $50,000, that's going to be income to you on your tax return, irrelevant of that. So, for some people, like we're nearing the end of the year, if you do have a health event and you do need a hardship withdrawal and you're still going to qualify come January, you may want to break that out over 2 years just to mitigate some of the taxes, and make sure you talk to a CPA about that. Try to keep yourself, because when you're in hardship, it can be overwhelming, but, take a moment, be calm, and say, what is the best thing to do? If you are struggling with a hardship scenario, I would encourage you to give us a call, and maybe there's something we can do. Maybe there's opportunities you haven't realized that are out there that can help mitigate some of this stuff. So, hardship is horrible. People struggle every day. You don't have to be alone in it.
Speaking of hardship, would you pay for your own paycheck? Let me say that again. Would you pay for your own paycheck? Wage access apps think so. Thank you, Sarah Friedman. This is the growing popularity of wage apps is the newest symptom of America's shortcomings. To shorten time between paychecks, more people are turning to wage access apps, services that offer users early access to earned funds in exchange for a fee. Apparently, more than 1/3 of Americans say they couldn't cover $400 in emergency expense in cash, and the average consumer has $5.7 thousand in credit card debt. Well, there's some support to the last article that we were talking about with you guys. An interesting solution, but I don't know necessarily that, in hardship, it's hard to say what you're going to do, right? Because it's immediate. It's a need. For the most part, my recommendation is for people to probably avoid paying some more penalty or some more fees to the instant access to cash. And if it happens to be the food that you're trying to put on your table for the week, that's a different story. You got to do it. If it happens to be the movies that you want to go to this week, I would certainly hope that there would be some restraint and maybe pushing that one down the road and finding another way to spend some time entertaining.
Yeah, I thought, the thing that leapt off of here that was just so concerning about, these are things that you see commercials on TV, hear on the radio more and more often, so that there's certainly some prevalence to this. And, obviously everybody, in the advertisement sounds so happy to have received their money in advance and how important it was for them. And you're right, Seth, if it's about putting food on the table, maybe there's really no choice in the matter. But these things are all taken as short-term loans, which means they need to be paid back immediately. So when you actually get that check, you need to settle that up. But the rate that they charge to float you the money for that short period of time, it equates to, on average, 300% of an annual interest rate, which is straight highway robbery.
Wow.
That's incredible. I think the thing is this is no different than any other cash your paycheck, on the street corner with somebody to just get an advance or a loan, whatever that is. And it's just becoming a way for people to really engage this in a very simple, quick process. I mean, if you're really that desperate and that's, you can't wait 2 or 3 days and you're looking at this cost, it's another reason to sit down with somebody like us to figure out if there's other opportunities for you to do. And you could be a spendthrift. You could be somebody who is perfectly healthy and working a job and so forth, and you just need to really cut and really live within your budget. And that's really hard, and making those decisions and looking at that and making, strong choices and getting rid of the weak ones. If you need help with that, give us a call. I mean, I think, that's one thing. We've helped so many people get, financially healthy, and then we've helped them get to retirement. Like, I've seen full cycle circles where people had real struggles financially to the point where we got them to where they needed to be and how they had to get there, and we've met people in retirement that started overspending their retirement funds and really started helping them curb that as well. And we're not parents. We don't hold people to it, but if you want that help, we're willing to engage in a way that would be strong and meaningful for you.
Well said. That's going to do it for us, Money in the News. You are listening to Money on Tap, and you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. When we come back, we have a special guest on board with us today. Cannot wait to get into why everyone needs an estate plan, and everyone has one, whether you know it or not. And you can't, you're going to have to stick around to hear more about that. Can't wait to get into this show with you guys. It's going to be so much fun. Thanks for being here with us on Money on Tap. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I'll be back.
Hello, everyone. This is Dan Mickelon of Brayshaw Financial Group. Are you looking for professional guidance to kickstart your investing journey? Look no further. Brayshaw Financial Advisors are here to help. Our team of experts will provide you personalized advice tailored to your financial goals. Visit us at BrayshawFinancial.com today and schedule your free consultation. Brayshaw Financial, investing made easy.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. It is good to have you aboard here with us today. And joining us is Marisol Cordero Goodman, attorney at law. So good to have you with us here today, Marisol. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you, Seth.
Good deal. So, hey, today this topic, or what are we covering today, is really why everyone needs an estate plan. And Marisol, I loved how we were just talking. You're like, well, everyone does have an estate plan. The law gives them one, whether they like it or not. It was pretty much verbatim what you just said. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's the truth. So if that's new to you and you're wondering, wait a second, I didn't even realize I have an estate plan. Yeah. Well, apparently that's the case. Marisol said so. And that's what we're going to stick with today. What she says goes, folks. And that's why she's on the show with us today. For one, we do realize that not everybody here has been, with us at Money on Tap for the last, 6 years, 7. Oh my gosh, I'm losing track. It's been a lot longer than that now. So maybe you need to get a little bit caught up. Maybe you're a first time with us. And for one, we just want to make sure that you are aware of, hey, what's a will? What is a trust? Marisol, could you just help us out a little bit? Get us caught up, because we're going to start diving into some case studies with you here in a minute.
Yeah, to break it down a little bit. As you mentioned, everyone has an estate plan. If you haven't put one in place, the law has put a default one in for you, and it may not be what you want. And so when folks are thinking about what actually is a plan, I tell my clients it is a collection of documents, literally documents that tell your person who's not you what to do and when. So there are different types of documents. There's a will, there's a trust, there's a power of attorney, there's advance directive. And it's almost analogous to like having tools in your tool shed. If you're a gardener, you're going to need a rake, a shovel, a trowel for depending on what job you want to do. If you want to plant a tree, using a rake is really ineffective, frustrating. It'll probably give you a lot of blisters. So what you really want to do is to have that shovel in order to dig that hole. And so what is an actual will? Well, a will is just a document that documents your wishes on how your assets are distributed at your death. It tells the court, this is who I want to manage all my last expenses, to pay my bills, to file my tax returns, and this is who I want to get it. And it goes through a public proceeding that is a matter of public record, and it has court oversight. The court gets to oversee this process. That is a will. It is a document that becomes effective upon your death. What is a trust? A trust is also a document. It's a contract. It is a contract that is private that says who gets what, who does what. The same thing, only it happens in the private realm. It is a contract between what we say three parties. I say three parties contract. And for most folks, this is how I describe what a trust is. A trust is merely a document that you are giving your assets to a fiduciary, just like your retirement account. You've given your monies in your 401k to the financial institution that's managing it for you. That contract says that when you get to a certain age, you get that monies, and there are certain tax allocations that happen with that. That is a three-party contract. You give your money to the financial institution who holds it for you on the benefit for you. And then at your death, that contract says, give it to my spouse, give it to my child. That is what a trust is. It is a contract that you have drafted up and say, this asset belongs to the trust. I'm the one who owns it. I'm giving it to the trustee, which generally sometimes is you, to manage it. And if it's not you, it's your spouse, or it's your best friend, or it's your professional fiduciary that you've chosen because they've got skill sets to do these things with, on the benefit for you while you're living. If you become incapacitated, also you. And then at your death, to your spouse, to your child, to your favorite charity in the world. But that's what a trust is. It is merely a document. And that's what estate planning is. They're documents that control different aspects of your lives.
Well said. It's a good time for us to jump into some case studies with you. We've got two here that are very real. One of them is a little probably more common than the other. However, I think it gives us a kind of a good lens to understand, Marisol, how does an estate plan potentially work? What are some of the pieces, and how to help this kind of a client into and through this process? Scenario number one, we've got a married couple. Okay. 45, 46, occupation. One is a teacher, one's an engineer, and they don't have any kids. So, combined, they have assets of roughly $3 million. They've got their personal savings, their 401k, roughly $500,000 in non-qualified investments. And those are just investments, like your bank accounts and brokerage accounts outside of your 401k and IRAs. For people wondering what that is, that's what that is. And, home valued at around $600,000. Okay. So this is somebody that they don't have any wills, they don't have any trusts, and they don't have any life insurance.
Right.
So
yeah.
Here we go.
So if I were to have this, client come into me office, one of the things I want to point out to them is, well, who gets your estate? You don't have children, and every state's a little bit different in their laws. The next person to get it often is next of kin. And so next of kin will vary. So if they're married to one another, and I know in Oregon, for instance, they're married to one another, no children, the next of kin is each other. And that might be exactly what they want. They want their assets to go to each other, to help care for the survivor, to provide that survivor the quality of life that they want. Then the survivor has it. Who's their next of kin? Well, it depends. For if one of the survivor has living parents, it may be their parents. So what happens to the other parents? They get nothing. Or maybe the survivor next of kin may be siblings. So one side of the family gets all the assets, and the other spouse's side of the family gets nothing. So this may create some inequities, and may create some hard feelings, and we kind of want to avoid that situation. So I described to them, first of all, what would happen if something were to happen to them today and they don't do documents. And again, this is going to vary slightly from state to state, because every state will define what they believe next of kin is. It's not always consistent. That may or may not be their intent. They may not care who gets it next, but most folks do. And if you go far enough in some states, if you go far enough, and let's say you're an only child whose parents aren't surviving, you don't have any cousins, and your family distance tree is far away enough from you, it is possible that your assets will go to the state. It will escheat to the state. So that may also not be exactly what you want to have happen. So these are considerations for that particular client to know. The other thing to know is that there will be an estate tax, depending on some states. And I know a lot of the Northeast states have estate tax. I know in Oregon we do. It's $1 million. There's a tax. There's a significant tax that the survivor may be paying for. It depends if they're allowed a exemption. Every state's a little bit different. So in Oregon, the survivor probably is allowed an exemption that will allow them to postpone that tax, but that tax is going to get kicked down the road. And when you're at $3 million in Oregon, you're looking at $200,000 in estate tax. So there are some real questions as to where that money comes from. Is there liquidity? The house? Depending on who's receiving that, they may not have the money right away to pay that, and that tax return will be due when that tax return. In Oregon, it's a year from when that tax return. If it's federal, it's 9 months. Every state, again, makes some of their own rules, and it's really important to consult with an attorney in your state to know what will happen in that. But a life insurance policy will provide liquidity. It will provide liquidity. So if you have assets that are tied up that are not so readily liquid, that policy will provide liquidity in the state that will pay for that potential tax bill, so that the survivor or the survivor's next of kin won't be faced with having to come up with a significant amount of cash at possibly adverse tax consequences. Those are the things that I would at least want to note to this particular couple is who gets it next after the survivor. Does that feel fair? Is that something that they wanted to? Usually most couples want to benefit family members equally in some sense. And so they will have to create a plan that will allow for that. Yeah, or it could get diverted. And I hear this story often, kind of the cautionary of, my uncle remarried and everything went to the new spouse's family and nothing came back to his siblings, in which he had really close ties with. And perhaps uncle was paying for the care of one sibling. That's not uncommon when you have family members, and everything went to an entirely different family altogether. And that's always it's heartbreaking for me to hear that. And I hear that more often than not when things get diverted into an entirely new family.
Marisol, I think one of the things that resonates with me as you're talking is $200,000 or $300,000 in taxes. And we're not even talking federal. Like, we're just talking to the state of Oregon in that scenario. I think a lot of people don't realize, that if they don't do any estate planning, that the taxes are just the highest they possibly can be. It's just the most expensive route to go. And some of these estate planning things are really not as complicated as they sound. I mean, can you share a little bit about, some of the coaching you do when a client comes in and meets with you and you kind of walk through this? Because I just know that a lot of people get very fearful when they hear, I need to talk about my estate plan, when I'm going to die, and I have to go see an attorney. They feel a little insecure about how much they do or don't know. They're a little intimidated by the event, and they're scared about talking about kind of these life-changing, events with losing a spouse. They're disheartening conversations. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I completely understand that sentiment. I have clients come in and who've been avoiding what makes them really feel uncomfortable, and that is a natural response to avoid that conversation. One of the things I congratulate them on is you're here with me and we get to have this conversation when you are not stressed out, when you are not in crisis or not experiencing grief. How wonderful is that you get to share with me what you don't know? And my job is to give you enough tools to understand how to go next. So you describe to me what you own, and I will tell you what will happen to that particular asset, and we will decide together, is that what you want? Usually we do modifications because that's not what they want, and we start dreaming about what potentially it could look like to create a plan, and I mean dreaming, a plan that makes it easeful, for the decision. So it's not just distribution of assets on wealth, it's also making decisions about your medical care. And I think the most heartening thing that I've ever experienced as an attorney is having a client come in after his wife had died to share with me how easy my plan made it for them when she was in hospice, and that my advance directive that I drafted with them was provided to their physician who helped do their pulse, which is the order that told the nursing home what to actually do based on the plan and conversation that I had had with her prior to her death, and that it made it so easy. They didn't have to answer these questions when they were in the throes of it because it had already been answered. The plan was already in place. The doctors knew what to do. The nurses knew what to do. The aides knew what to do. And it just it was real tears in his eyes when he shared with me the ease of which the last final weeks of her life were based on this document that they had done with the foresight well in advance, because they had that more uncomfortable conversation with me where we got to talk about where was their threshold of frailty, at what point was acceptable to them and not acceptable, and what the choices they want their agent to make for them. That's not just for the living decision, but it goes to the wills and trusts as well, what to do next.
You're listening to Money on Tap, and we have pleasure of spending time with Marisol Goodman. Cordero Goodman today, attorney at law. If you are resonating with what we're talking about here in the estate planning world, she's available for you. You can reach us or get a hold of Marisol by reaching out to us at Money on Tap at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Also, want to say thank you if you like the podcast and do us the favor of just subscribing. Let us know. We'd love to send you out some Money on Tap gear. Just a thank you for being here with us and spending some time with us today. We're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get into some more case study, and then we're also going to spend some time talking about updates in the estate planning world, what you need to start to pay attention to and know what's coming down the path here in estate planning. You're listening to Money on Tap. We'll be right back. Hey guys, Seth Cressman with Brayshaw Financial Group. Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Look no further than Brayshaw Financial Group. Our team of experienced advisors is dedicated to helping beginners like you build wealth through smart investing strategies. Visit BrayshawFinancial.com today and start your journey towards financial independence. Brayshaw Financial Group, your partner in wealth creation.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Joining us today is Marisol Cordero Goodman, attorney at law. We are talking about why everyone needs an estate plan, and we had some fun jumping into a great case study. I think it's one that's very familiar and more common than people probably realize. And I think one of the things we see is that people, without even realizing it, for one, already have an estate plan granted them by the law, whether they know it or not, but also have gotten themselves financially or through different marriage or remarriages or whatever the scenarios are, really into a place where they really do need to sit down and put some documents, like you said, in place that help to guide and help people to know how to guide people, assets, you name it, through the process of passing on. And that can be quite a while in the medical world before passing on, or even once post passing on. There's just a process for the assets and the delivery and how things get managed. Dan, you had some great questions into this next segment.
Yeah, Marisol, you were describing how you want to make sure that both sides of the family are represented, and certainly when things end up in probate and the conversation around next of kin comes up, very likely one end of the family, the predeceased side, is not going to be represented there. But there's other scenarios that come along, such as when the survivor gets remarried, and then some stepchildren potentially come into play, or there's just simply a falling out between the survivor and their deceased spouse's side of the family, where that the deceased person's wishes may get lost in the shuffle as life goes on and takes its twists and turns for the survivor. So could you hit on a little bit about the difference between a will and a revocable trust and irrevocable, and how you can really take steps to cement those wishes while both spouses are alive and have a voice in the matter?
Yes, if the deceased spouse is really wishing to provide for others, it could be their own children, it could be siblings, nieces and nephews, depending on the scenario. There are ways inside of both a will and a trust to do that. So with the will that's presented to the court, it could be that they are funding a trust, an irrevocable trust inside their will. Their will creates an irrevocable trust that says the monies in this trust will be held separately, and perhaps it will say the income will go to the surviving spouse, monies from a fiduciary, somebody who may not be so tied in, especially if you're trying to maintain relationship. You may want to have an independent fiduciary who will provide monies to the surviving spouse, and then at the surviving spouse's death, give those monies directly to the first deceased spouse's family, so that the family lineage is taken care of, whether it's their children, their nieces and nephews. So you can do that inside of a will. You can also do that, and that's part of the public process. You can also do that inside of a trust. You can have a revocable trust where in your lifetime, you want to change your mind as many times as you want to provide for whomever you want. So you want that power. So that's a revocable trust. When you retain the right to change your mind about what your documents do, you have a revocable trust. And then in that trust, you create at your death an irrevocable trust. Now, this can actually have some implications for tax planning. There are tax planning considerations, all types of tools that I use that will have some benefits for tax planning, that will remove the asset from the surviving spouses so that it doesn't get taxed at their estate. It only gets taxed once. But it also accomplished the desire to preserve assets for the generation. Now, depending on the relationship between the beneficiaries, I may either recommend more of a familial trustee or I'll recommend an independent trustee, so that the trustee is not swayed by those things. One of those areas of litigation, which is unfortunate, is when there are differences in the relationship between the beneficiary and the trustee. So if you have a stepchild managing trust for a step parent, that potentially could raise up litigation issues. And so we try to avoid those when we don't know that the relationship is so strong. We want to provide that buffer. But absolutely, you'd be able to create a plan that would allow you to make sure that your family is taken care of, whether that's your children. It could be the children, the two of you. The two of you have children together, and you could be young, and your children are young, and you want to make sure that what you work for during your lifetime goes to benefit your spouse, but also really to benefit your children. And that if your spouse remarries, that they perhaps maybe can have more children, or they adopt other children. You just want to make sure that a portion of that pie that you work so hard for goes to your children. So that often is a common scenario, trying to preserve, and you create a trust that will be irrevocable, where the terms can change, where your surviving spouse could still be a beneficiary of and still be provided for, but you get to make sure that your children are benefited from that. So those are tools. Again, tools in your tool shed. What kind of tools do you need to accomplish what it is that you desire?
Awesome. We have another scenario here for you behind door number 2. Are you ready?
I'm excited for this scenario. Let's go.
Okay. All right. Here we go. So we've got married couple, age 45 and 50, business owners with a C Corp. The business has 3 locations, and they own property actually for one of the locations, lease the other 2. They're all in the same state. Okay. And there's associated debt, roughly $1 million for one of the properties. Okay. Business is valued at approximately $10 million. They own 2 rental houses, 1 primary residence. They have 3 children over the age of 18, no grandchildren, no life insurance, no will, no trust in place. And their primary assets consist of cash, real estate, and their business.
Yeah. So this was an exciting one. It's got some complications. The fact that the businesses all remain in the same state does ease some of the complications for some of your listeners who may have businesses in other states. Keep in mind that you may have an issue of venue, depending on where your business is located. So you may have different jurisdictions that you may have probates in different states, especially with no plan. That's potential. But for this particular couple who has everything in one state, the first thing that pops out into my mind immediately is what a tax bill that they will have. A significant tax bill. Potentially at minimum, we're talking about $1 million in Oregon. And depending on some of the states in the Northeast, it could also be around that bill for just state alone. So that comes into play. Like, where is that money going to come from? If you've got a C corporation that has some debts and liabilities already, I don't imagine there's going to be $1 million in liquidity there. One of the things that the C Corp could own is a key man policy, which is a life insurance policy on somebody who's integral to the business that would allow them to have some liquidity to buy out shares. So if you've got a C Corp, you've got different shareholders in there, you may want to have a policy that will allow for the survivor to be bought out, to buy out their shares so that business can continue. So that's one thing, is to think about who is the owner of those shares. If you've got a person who's deceased, their estate is the owner of those shares, and the estate is now part of that process. So you've got liquidity. Who can buy out those shares so the estate actually has some monies from that? The other thing you want to think about is succession planning, minimal interruption. If your decedent, the person who passed away, is integral to the operation of this corporation, you're going to need a succession plan, an absolute succession plan inside of it. So this is often a conversation between corporate counsel and estate planning counsel to work on a succession plan to make sure that there's minimal interruptions. Because I imagine with a C Corp, there are employees. Especially with $10 million company, you've got, book of business, you've got services, you've got contracts that you don't want the corporation to all of a sudden be in default over and then open up the estate to litigation because you defaulted on your contracts because you're missing key abilities, folks, to do that. So that's one issue. I would want to walk them through that, especially with corporate counsel on board to talk about that. In addition, you've got rental houses and primary residence. So when I think of rental houses, I think about, well, it's not vacation home. It's not their home. How are we limiting liability from the other estate? This is a person with potentially deep pockets. And you've got rental houses. I may want to suggest considering owning those rental homes in a entity of some kind to limit liability, maybe an LLC, because it is a business. They're running a business. They're landlords. Things can happen. We want to make sure that we insulate the entire rest of the estate from liabilities from those activities. They went ahead and did that for their business. They formed a C Corp. It would make sense for them to go ahead and do that for their rental properties. That's another type of business. And so we want to make sure that those are either fully insured in there. And then they've got children over the age of 18. They've got a class of folks. I say class when you've got more than one child or more than one person in that class that all have equal standing to be appointed as personal representative. And depending on how old their children are, you may want to go ahead and take out any race to the courthouse in that. And you want to really have a real clear discussion with your loved ones about what choice looks like. One of the things I talk about often with clients is that choosing a fiduciary is not equated with love, and trying to get their children and their loved ones to understand that their choice isn't about trust or reflection of their feelings about that particular person, but rather what they're looking at is responsibility. When I had this conversation with my siblings, I said, okay, who volunteers to do my taxes? And you don't get to ask me any questions at all. And you get to go to my office and go through my papers. Who wants to do that? And it was like crickets. No, nobody wanted to do that. So it just shifted the conversation as to, oh, Marcel trusts me the most and therefore she chose me. It was more like, oh, I am undertaking this huge responsibility of making sure the taxes are filed, and I cannot ask Marcel any questions. I've got to trust that Marcel has all her documentation, that she's got her bookkeeper, she's got her CPA in order for me to understand to do somebody else's taxes, let alone my own taxes. So those are important things in there when we talk about that. And the fact that they have no life insurance, no wills, no trust for me is concerning because, again, the state will provide default rules and in place potentially make this a matter of public record and can slow down the process. And when you run a business, you don't want necessarily the process to be slow. You want people to be able to step right into place. And so you can do this with some really thoughtful planning on what happens next. And especially with that life insurance policy, having a policy either that the corporation owns that's not includable in the estate of the decedent is one way to approach it. It could be a combination, not only that policy, but another policy to help cover the expenses, because you're going to have a significant tax bill here and you're going to want some liquidity. So maybe a combination of a conversation with both a financial advisor, your corporate attorney, your estate planning attorney, and possibly even your CPA, and do a team approach, which would be the best way to do this particular planning for this scenario.
This is great, Marisol. I just was thinking about the no life insurance, the no will, and the no trust in place, but yet they have a C Corp in place, right? I mean, a lot of people just have no problem going to an attorney or a CPA and setting up their C Corp and getting that all together. But why is the will and the trust and the life insurance just like the last thing in the world? And they literally could be I mean, if people knew they were taking a financial business risk of like $3 million that they could mitigate pretty well, why wouldn't they do it? Like what is it? What is the roadblock? And I think that's one of the things. I know we all want you to communicate certain things, but that's one thing I want our listeners to hear is these roadblocks are really not as monumental as people have them in their minds. They really need to just break down and get some real professional help and get some of this stuff taken care of. And I don't know if I have a question in there, but I just really want to share that because these examples are close to real examples. Like we've pulled these out of old files and information and stuff and scenarios of what comes through the door. And that's what makes them funny. But this is not any one unique person. This is the majority of people that we have.
Yeah, and I think you're correct on that particular piece is that most folks recognize it's really important. It's really important to get it done, and they know it's important. The urgency for it to get done, because it's something that will happen perhaps later down the road, is what the lacking is, the urgency. So they realized how important and urgent it was to get their C Corp in place because they had employees to hire and actual taxes to file that year. And so recognizing the real importance, and the problem is when the urgency hits, when you calling me from the hospital room, there's some real issues that potentially can come up as far as, is there undue influence here? Is there lack of capacity issues here? The planning time may have come and gone that window and you're stuck with a plan that you may not have wanted. So understanding that the urgency part isn't necessarily here now, but could potentially be here. And that's what I want to part to folks is, yes, this is so important. And let's get to this before the urgency. And most clients don't realize when they work with me, we're working together for at least 2 to 3 months, and sometimes as long as 6 months or more, that this process takes time to really do something very thoughtful.
And I think that's really important to know is like, yeah, it does take some time. So I think that's monumentally what people think, like this is a lot of time. But the truth is, it's just a lot of emotional expense, kind of going through like, who do you want to have make your mental health decisions or your physical health decisions? Who do you want to have you care for your financials and so forth? They don't take a lot of time to put on paper. It's just really digging through. And we do the same thing. We have to dig through people's emotions and their fears and what they're trying to, portray. And if we can't hear that story verbally and then translate it into a financial scenario, that makes a really complicated piece. And the same, I think, for an attorney is really trying to understand what people want in that whole outcome to happen and say, these documents do what you want emotionally to happen here. And I think that's the time burden. You're not sitting down with Marisol folks for 3 to 6 months every day. It's a few meetings here and there and a few drafts to read through, and you're dreaming your dreams of how you want to take care of your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, and the generations to come and how you're going to impact.
Yeah. And the relief is real. I mean, like I said, that gentleman who came into my office, that relief is really real to have that plan in place to make what could have been a really hard situation. And it already is hard. You're losing the love of your life. And to have that not be impacted, just to feel so cared for through that process is real. Yeah. I saw that on his face. I couldn't have missed it. And that's the reward that I get for doing a job well done.
You're listening to Money on Tap, and we are talking with Marisol Cordero Goodman. If you'd like to get in touch with her, you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. A quick thanks for our podcast listeners. And if you like us and subscribe, we'd love to send you some Money on Tap gear. Again, you can reach out to us at info@yourmoneyontap.com or 855-226-8551. When we come back, we're going to get updated in the estate planning world. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Money on Tap. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for personalized guidance to kickstart your investing journey? Look no further. Brayshaw Financial Group and our planners are here to help. Our team of experts will provide personalized advice tailored to your financial goals. Visit BrayshawFinancial.com today to schedule your free consultation. Brayshaw Financial, investing made easy.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. at yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Talking today with Marisol Cordero Goodman, and attorney at law. And we've been talking about really why everyone needs an estate plan. We've had a great time in a couple of scenarios and really unfolding, dynamics inside of what estate planning can do for people in their business and their personal life and this whole process. We do not have a whole lot of time left here with you, Marisol. So first of all, just want to thank you so much for being here with us. And please come back as often as you possibly can. It's a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're going to go ahead and basically give us the hot topic. We want to have like what's hot in the estate planning world, and then also we've got a couple other things before we wrap up.
Well, the estate planning world is always looking at the future, what potentially could come down the pipeline. But the things we note to our clients are the increase in annual gifting exclusion amount and really taking advantage of that, especially if you do an irrevocable trust, you want to be able to do gifting into that and maximize that. But when the clients who don't do the planning come to me, I recognize that a lot of my income comes from the folks who don't make plans. When I do probates, I'm getting paid more than when I'm doing a trust administration. So that's something to keep in mind by not doing the plan, is that potentially you're just pushing that cost out into the future when you least can often afford that particular piece. But as far as estate planning, we're just keeping our pulse on what's happening in the legislature, what are potential changes, and noting to our clients that some of these changes can have some real effects on your plan. And so keeping those up to date becomes really important.
Okay, I just want to, if people didn't catch that, I love this. So if you don't do the estate planning, it's going to cost you more than if you do the estate planning. Is that right?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, in the end, I get paid more for doing probate filings. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that is a particular piece that when I have clients who come to me and they don't want to do a plan, or they want to do a very minimal plan, I'm very upfront with them about being paid on the back end of that, but that's not their concern anymore. It could be the beneficiary's concern. But I am very upfront about that.
Good. Yeah, I think that's great for people to understand is, kicking this thing down the road doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have the outcome that you were thinking it might, right? Your costs go up. And what I really appreciate your sharing here is that the kind of stress that you go through in the process of working through the finalization of estate planning, those final pieces, that this is an inevitability, and it's a decision that you get to make about what those outcomes look like for yourself, for your spouse, for the people that you love and care about, for the people that, you may not even have a relationship with them now, but they might be there coming behind you to kind of pick up the pieces. You get to choose, and, not choosing is choosing too. And I think that's something that escapes some people sometimes. Another part is that there's a lot of people that are going into retirement, a lot more than we've had previously. And this is the influx that we've seen passing through our society right now. And so there's limited capacity inside of the estate planning world. And right now, Marisol has the capacity to plan and to schedule and to meet with you and go through this process versus trying to wait months and months and months just to be able to get in to see her or somebody like her to do the work. So don't let the time slip away. Go ahead, be successful in this part of your investing as well, because this is an investment of your time and your resources, and it's well worth it. As you've heard, the outcome is incredibly beneficial to be able to have done this work ahead of time, done the planning work, and spent the investment with Marisol in your estate plan. Marisol, thank you so much for being here with us today at Money on Tap. Again, what a pleasure to spend this time with you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
That's going to do it for us at Money on Tap. Be successful in your investing. We cannot wait to be here with you next week.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.